What's up, Barnhill family, and welcome back to your home for all things combat sports.
Yo.
So, Nick, I got to ask you, this was clearly a robbery. Jared Gordon, Paddy Pimblett. Does it rise to robbery of the year? And then based on that performance, do you really think Paddy Pimblett can realistically compete with the top guys at 155?
A couple good questions. And one thing that sticks out is anytime we're talking about robbery of the year or fight of the year or knockout of the year, you also have to bring in the magnitude of the fighters, magnitude of the situation. And when you're talking about a co-main event on a pay-per-view card, there's a lot behind that. When you're talking about one of the biggest stars the sports has right now in Paddy the Baddy, of course, these things do matter. And maybe somebody that gets robbed on a lower level of MMA or even on the prelims of a UFC card might not seem the same as somebody like Paddy the Baddy getting a robbery in his favor. And for me, it felt like Jared Gordon won that fight fair and square. Everybody seemed to be pro Paddy going into that fight. And if my ears were listening correctly, once they announced that Paddy had won the fight, it was a roaring boo throughout the entire crowd. And there was a lot of people in there that were very pro Paddy. You had the Baddy bangs on everybody in the crowd. So I think people realized that he maybe got handed something by the judges.
Yeah, and it's amazing to see just how big of a star this young kid, Paddy the Baddy, has become. I mean, this was a pay-per-view that there was a lot of shuffling at the last minute, and I think in a lot of ways the UFC was looking at Paddy to carry this card from a star standpoint. You know, Magomed Ankalaev is obviously extremely skilled, Jan Blachowicz, a former champion, but as far as when you look at the crowd last night, who was wearing what merchandise, the Paddy the Baddy shirts were everywhere. As you said, the wigs, the Baddy bangs, as you like to call them, were all throughout the crowd. And I'm a fan of Paddy, but I have to call things as I see it. I saw that fight 30-27 for Jared Gordon. I think he won every single round. I don't see how the judges scored that for Paddy. And moreover, a unanimous decision for Paddy if you look at who was doing the most damage, because that's kind of the most important top line thing that we look at. Who's creating more damage and hurting their opponent more so than their opponent is hurting them? That was clearly Jared Gordon. He kept landing that left hook almost with ease. He hit it 3-4 times in a row, and a couple of times in that second round even had Paddy covering, ducking, and running away from him. So optically, to me, it was quite clear that Jared Gordon won those first two rounds, and then the last round was, I mean, not much happened in the last round. Jared was kind of holding Paddy against the cage, but I would say all things considered, he was winning the positional fight in those regards, and so I would give the third round to Jared as well. And so it's tough. I mean, Paddy's obviously a big star. He's obviously on the rise, but to me, this felt a lot like a robbery.
Yeah, and Paddy sure handled the pressure well. And you're right when you say that they tried to put basically the weight of the pay-per-view card on his back. All of the embeddeds had him in the thumbnail, and everybody was kind of talking about Paddy. He probably got the most screen time. You know, Dana White did a podcast with him. He was doing that blank word Friday that Dana White likes to do on his Instagram page. So there was a lot that Paddy was doing for this card. But if anybody rose to the occasion more than Paddy, it was Jared Gordon. And I do think the moment was getting to Jared right when the fight had started. He looked a little bit nervous, looked a little bit timid to get engaging with Paddy. But he was the first one to land a big strike. And like you said, that front hook kept landing for him. And I think as soon as he landed one or two of those, he was like, you know what? This is just another fight. It's just another human standing in front of me. I've gotten my hand raised 19 times as a professional. I think I can do this again against this guy, even though he's a big star. He kind of has that it factor about him, that certain glow. I still think I can get my hand raised against him. And as clear as day, I think Jared Gordon won the first round and the third round. The second one is up for debate, and I do see where people would probably say Paddy won that. But all day, he won the first round. He did more damage, and he landed more strikes. And what Paddy was kind of hanging his hat on after the fight, you know, he was like, oh, I coasted in the third fight easy because I knew I had won the first two, no problem. And if I'm watching that fight, he for sure lost the first round. There's not even a debate.
Right.
Jared Gordon landed more strikes, and they were more significant, and he landed at a higher percentage. He was at like 60% landing rate, and he had wobbled or, you know, rocked Paddy more than Paddy rocked him. Paddy landed like 30, half the percentage that Jared Gordon landed. And I feel like the crowd was starting to realize that Jared Gordon was not just in this fight, but he was actually leading the fight. And then third round, obviously, like you said, there's not much to score on there. When nobody's doing damage and nobody's really pushing a pace, whoever's controlling the octagon and controlling the positions generally gets the nod there. But I guess the judges saw something we didn't.
And I think, I mean, 29-28 at best was the decision, and it should have gone in the favor of Jared Gordon. I can see a case, as I said in the beginning of the video, for 30-27, which brings me to that second part, the follow-up question, because Jared Gordon, quite honestly, looked like a bantamweight in there last night. He looked substantially smaller than Paddy, and it's no slight to Jared. He's a great fighter, but he's not a top 15, 155-pound fighter in the UFC. So it sort of brings about the questions that we've had about Paddy for a long time, and it's kind of, in a lot of ways, the same questions we had about Sean O'Malley a year or so ago. Now, Sean has risen to the occasion and showed us that it's not just the colorful hair and the spunky personality. There's some real skill behind it. But with Paddy, I'm not quite sold yet. Rafael Fiziev came out and said, look, somebody name me a guy in the top 20 that wouldn't finish Paddy. And I got to be honest, I think he's kind of right. I don't know if everybody in the top 20 necessarily would finish Paddy, but I don't think he could really beat anybody in the top 15 as it sits right now.
Yeah, I don't either. And I think Sean O'Malley had to prove himself through beating these guys, and then eventually he outgrew the competition that they were giving him. They're like, all right, this kid is just literally handling all the people we're giving him. We got to start bumping up his competition. And now he's risen to the occasion. He's the #1 contender for good reason now. But Paddy the Baddy is getting rocked, getting, in my opinion, beat by guys that aren't even in the top 20 of the division. And I understand lightweight is the most stacked division in the entire history of the sport, not just in the UFC, but across all promotions. The UFC's 155 division is super stacked right now, and Jared Gordon is a great fighter, but he looked like a 45er in there, and Paddy looked like he was a step behind in most of the realms of the fight. And I just feel like if you give him one of these guys, you bump up his competition like they did with Sean O'Malley after about 3 or 4 fights in the UFC, you're going to wind up having your cash cow, your new superstar getting finished and getting hurt badly, because the way he fights, he gets rocked a lot, he gets hit a lot, he's good on the ground, he knows what he's doing down there, but some of these dudes just don't get submitted at this level. And I feel like Paddy's going to find himself in a lot of very difficult fights very soon, especially because he doesn't have much further to go up as far as the placement of the card goes. These guys in the co-main events, main events, right out there on the main card of a pay-per-view slot are all absolute killers. And at 155, there are no easy fights.
That is for sure. When you're closing out the show or you're the co-main event on a UFC card, there are no easy fights. Thanks for watching this video, guys. We're your hub for all things combat sports. If that's your jam, we appreciate a subscribe and a like on the video, and drop us a comment down below. We'll see you next time.
Peace.